All right. And I think we are live, although I'm seeing Michael's face.
We are live.
Uh, howdy, everyone, and welcome to Node Foundation Enterprise Conversations. I'm Tracy Hines, here along with Michael Rogers from the Node Foundation. Say hi.
Hello.
Cool. And we're also here with the folks from Twitter. We've got James Bellinger.
Hi.
Awesome. Nicholas Gallagher.
Hi.
And Ethan Schlenker. And
Hello, you did that right. Good job.
Oh, great. I was going to say, I'm so sorry if I've botched anybody's names.
Got them all.
Awesome. All right. So, hi, how are y'all doing?
Good. Yeah. Doing all right. It's been a good week.
Awesome. That's good. Well, I think we'll go ahead and dig in then. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So for the first question, we're gonna dive in and just tell us a bit about your roles and team at Twitter.
So we are the engineering team on Twitter Lite, and that is a Twitter client for the mobile web. And we have about 10 engineers total. I'm James, by the way, and I lead the Twitter Lite backend service, and that all runs on Node.js. I came from working on JVM applications before, and with no Node experience, found it fairly easy to get started and build, I think, a pretty reliable service.
Yeah, I'm Nicholas. I'm the tech lead for Twitter Lite, and I kind of like steered us off the Scala-based services that we were doing before onto a JavaScript stack. So we ended up using Node.js for all of our tools and the backend, and we were thinking about doing server-side rendering with it initially, although that hasn't ended up being a thing that we do. But we definitely have doubled down on JavaScript, that's for sure.
I'm Ethan. I'm the engineering manager for the team. I showed up late. A lot of this work was already done by the time I got here. But at my last job at Trulia, I introduced Node into their stack and built the mobile website. Kind of similarly here, but just at a much smaller scale.
Awesome. Maybe we'll have to hit them up another time.
They're still getting used to the idea. They love PHP a lot.
I think we get that a lot. All right, well, let's see. Can you give us an example of a project where Node was implemented at Twitter and where in your stack you were using Node?
Probably the best example is Twitter Lite. So Twitter Lite is just sort of shipped last week, though it's been in development for a little while longer. And we're using Node for the entire build and test and delivery pipeline for Twitter Lite. So that's that runs on developers' laptops. It runs in CI environments, and then the actual Twitter Lite service itself that also runs on Node, and it's based on Express. And it really it does a lot of web serving. I think we have around 1,000 CPU cores running the Twitter Lite Node service, and it does a fair bit of traffic.
So you mentioned that before a lot of that stuff had been on like Scala and Java and whatnot. Can you tell us what the difference in experience was in scaling out this Twitter client as opposed to some of the prior Scala and Java stuff?
Yeah, I guess for me in particular, I came to Twitter barely being able to write JavaScript, and so the idea of writing working on a web app where I had to write CSS, HTML, or handlebars, that kind of stuff, JavaScript and Scala. Was like a very high barrier to entry. And so for most of my time at Twitter, as I've been learning more and more about how to actually build apps, I've also been looking to help reduce the barrier to entry, lower the breadth of expertise that's required in order for people to be productive and to make good products here. And so when we had the opportunity to rebuild the mobile website, it made a lot of sense to try and consolidate the development around JavaScript because it was a language that's much faster to work in, that front-end developers are much more familiar with. And when there was the opportunity to kind of simplify the backend, Node.js felt like a good option for that because of the simplicity of what we were looking to do and the fact that it would allow crossover between developers who worked on the backend and the client side previously. So it was kind of like a little bit of an experiment that we started a couple of years ago. And at the time, there was, a lot of I don't know, like uncertainty around JavaScript and Node.js. Can we even run this in our data centers? Will anyone even want us to do this? And so kind of like building up like larger organizational buy-in has been a big part of it as well, such to the point where now we have like the web tools team here have taken over ownership of kind of like managing and scaling JavaScript and Node in general at Twitter. And so now we can have regular updates to Node.js, NPM, Yarn, those kind of tools, and they propagate across all developer machines, CI, and the production environments. And that's just light years ahead of where we were a couple of years ago, where it was really a kind of install whichever version of Node.js your team is using and hope for the best. So just overall, in general, the whole of Twitter has kind of become much more interested in Node.js and become much more mature in the way that we deploy Node and the JavaScript tools that are built on top of it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, so I think we've covered this a little bit, but I always like to dive into this more because it's interesting where we end up hearing this. Why did y'all choose Node?
Yeah, I think to build on what Nicholas said, it's really, really hard, I think, to overstate the value of having the same tech that kind of runs in multiple contexts. I think for the application that we're building a web app, JavaScript is inevitable. So if we're having a different technology on the back end, we end up spending a lot of time just sort of solving operational problems. And these are problems that sort of happen at these kind of boundaries of technologies. So we might deal with like thrift structures and trying to take this thrift thing and turn it into JSON, and that's a lot of kind of time spent working on things that aren't really building the application. So I think having the same technology, it allows engineers to be a lot more fluid. People can sort of work on the application rather than working on the client and working on the server. And it's kind of almost like like AWS for engineers. You just sort of like go to where the problem is and you work on it. You don't really have to worry too much about what is the context that it's running in. And that's really, really valuable. And I think it's what has enabled us to iterate really quickly and I think produce something that is high quality in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, there's one thing that you'd mentioned before when we were like, James kind of comes from a Scala microservice background, and he was like, it's also really nice to have like NPM available like on the server, where we don't necessarily have those sort of tools for our other services here, where it's like there's a nice library and the quality is pretty good.
Yeah, I think the module ecosystem is vast and really high quality, and it really kind of there's not a lot of wheels that need to be reinvented. There's a lot of just find the right package, hopefully improve it if we can, and go from there.
What are some of your favorite packages that you're using right now in production?
Node.js.
Like NPM packages.
ExpressWorks. I think there's a lot to be said for a lot of our build pipeline tools. Like Webpack is a special kind of magic. Yarn is great. These aren't things that are necessarily specific to like the Node environment that the service runs on, but they're really, really big part of our application and our development cycle.
Yeah, like something like Express, for example, is when you start off as a small team and we have to effectively try and provide value as quickly as possible and bootstrap an initiative and show that it's worth continuing to build and won't just like suck time and money out of the company and die and produce nothing. Being able to like rely on pre-existing packages to bootstrap all of that, even if later on we've ended up going through a lot of the code base and removing external dependencies and either writing our own much more smaller and more specific packages, or adopting other packages that are that are actually better aligned with where the product has actually ended up. But the ability to move very quickly by assembling a lot of pre-existing pieces is something that's been like obviously very well received on the front end side of things. And for us as a company that's obviously worked a lot with Scala to build web servers, being able to do the same with Node.js has been great, because we effectively have one kind of full-time backend person, and that's James, and a service that handles a lot of requests versus previous model where pretty much everyone was a Scala engineer, and you have quite a lot of development that is on the server side and not really just generating views for the client. So that kind of bootstrapping thing that Node.js let us do, or that entire ecosystem rather, that was, looking back, that was a really a great way to save time and to kind of validate our approach to Twitter specific problems rather than getting into the details of how we do routing and all of that.
Awesome. I think y'all are making this way too easy because we're transitioning into the next question when you've sort of already touched on it. But is there a project that you can reference where Node directly impacted the team and the business?
It's going to be the same answer.
Yeah, right?
Yep. TwitterLite is, I think it's been a really good, success for Twitter.
Yeah. So I think looking wider throughout the company, there's a lot of web application development in general, and while not all of them will be using Node backends, the Node platform is basically what powers all of our front end tooling, and is used heavily in internal tools as well. So even if we weren't using it as a kind of service or as a platform for a service rather, it's just a fundamental part of how all of the web developers at Twitter build websites, whether it's just a tool chain or other things like Benchmark.
So you've talked a lot about kind of what things look like now, and you're sort of implying this is a change from how they were. And there was certainly a Twitter mobile client before y'all did this new work. So what did the workflow and the teams look like before you all made this shift over to TwitterLite?
Well, there was a mobile website, but it wasn't being worked on. And it was really from a different time when, Android 2 was kind of the top end of browsers available on the Android platform. And the constraints were entirely different. And that team did an amazing job building a mobile web app under, extremely highly constrained environment. But after that project was kind of, stopped being invested in, it was effectively just like an app that was not a moving target. And meanwhile, most of us were working on the desktop twitter.com website, and started off building the, exploring a rebuild of the mobile website as a very small team, only 3 engineers and a designer. And gradually that morphed into turning back into a JavaScript application, because originally that started as a Scala-based thing as well. And so over time, over the last 2.5 years, that team has gradually been invested in more and more and has grown into about 10 engineers. But yeah, it very much started as a kind of exploratory attempt to kind of rekindle a mobile website. But otherwise, we were pretty much entirely focused on desktop web.
Yeah, the one thing that just kind of I've observed as it's gone is the switch from what we were using before to Node gave us kind of greater freedom, greater ownership of that platform, and less that's not possible in Scala. And it's well, if you want Node, it's your thing, and if you want to do it, go for it. And that kind of ownership and freedom, I think, was really important in terms of leaving legacy stuff behind to prove what's possible. But yeah, I think the answers we've been given, where it's TwitterLite, it just works. It's kind of it's almost boring in some ways of yeah, it did a really good job. It's fantastic. It unlocked this organizational freedom for us.
Yeah, it's to highlight how boring it is. Yeah, I think it's really, I think, telling that we're able to run vanilla Node.js in our kind of Twitter cloud environment with very little even Node or V8 switches. I think that's pretty cool that it's flexible enough to handle just kind of whatever we want to throw at it, within reason. We're not going to, I think we monitor this pretty closely, and we identify areas that, workloads that we aren't know is a good fit. But it's great that we can run it. We don't have to think about, how do we tune Node for our application? It just kind of goes. And it's this thing that we don't even have to think about, and that's really nice.
Yeah, I was talking about James with this yesterday. So we have a SRE for web, and our desktop website is Scala based on the back end. And so the SRE sits with the desktop web team and is not in constant conversation, but sits with us so that there's frequent conversation. And he's also supposed to be the SRE for the mobile website, but the times that you need to talk to him are like never,
Yeah,
or like
very rare.
if you just have like a weird esoteric question, he can be that answer. But
Yeah.
the
Operationally, it's just so easy. That's been a real treat.
And like it's worth mentioning that we weren't like technology zealots who were saying we should use Node.js because we love Node. We were looking at a series of problems that we had with so Twitter was originally like a Ruby stack, and they migrated it over to Scala. And while that improved the performance of the website, they're still in a situation where it's a giant JVM app that takes a very long time to deploy and has a huge amount of dependencies. And it's relatively expensive to run because of the sheer amount of work that's happening on the server. And so when we started the mobile website, we were initially kind of going down that same road, and we realized that we were kind of building another monolith, another mono service that would just have the same large dependency graph on Scala dependencies. And the ecosystem for the web at the same time was shifting towards these progressive web apps that could be, that we saw that it was heading to something that would be installed on the device, and the offline resilience was a crucial part of that. And the server rendered views, couldn't really, well, they weren't the primary way that we could exploit that. So kind of shifting all of our client-side application over to JavaScript, kind of naturally opened the door to something like Node.js, which, as I said, it was originally from this idea of like, oh, well, we'll do server rendering. Even though we don't at all, and looking back, that's probably the least relevant reason for why why we're happy with having Node. But it was really just something that that just fit with the problems that we were facing, or the solutions we were exploring. And yeah, the outcome is almost the total opposite. It's a very small, thin service. Most of the work is done in a browser, and the reliability and scaling issues internally are kind of not really relevant, simply because of the shift from the server to the client, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like you want your technology to match your team a little bit, and like Node kind of being lightweight and nimble matches like the Twitter Lite team being kind of like lightweight and nimble, and not like a mismatch of like, we have this giant Scala thing that we have to plug into the bureaucracy to.
Well, I mean, and you've got, all of your front end tooling using Node.js tools as well. And so if you have the whole team responsible for the whole product, then that makes a lot more sense, right?
Yeah.
Nice. What version of Node are y'all running?
I think it's like 6.7 right now. We're tracking LTS at the moment.
Maybe
Maybe it's 6.
Like
maybe it's 6.
yeah. I mean, this gets upgraded every 3 months automatically for us. So we would have known in the past, but now we don't really kind of care. The whole company just moves forward with whatever the latest version that the web tools team can maintain. So that's a pretty nice setup as well.
Nice. What version of Node did each of you start writing Node at?
11, or sorry, 0.11.
It was 0.8.
Mm-hmm. 0.8.
I think when 0.10 came out, that was like a big moment.
Yeah.
We briefly were using IO.js as well at one point before the the remerging of those efforts.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. All right. Well, lastly, will we get to see y'all at Node Interactive this year?
So this was the question I had. I was like, what? I think we're all like, what does Node Interactive like? Tell us about what Node Interactive does. And we hadn't looked into it. And I was kind of like talking to James was like, is this a better place for it to like level up Node knowledge in terms of, as Twitter Lite grows, do we need to like actually have somebody with more kind of SRE experience? Or if we want to do more with the server, where do we learn that? So kind of like, tell us more about Node Interactive. It's not, learning more is something we're all interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. It's a bunch of different levels. So you've got folks who are sort of at the scale that y'all are operating at, trying to chat with one another about sort of the problems that you're facing, and being able to present that in a way that other people get to learn from it. And then, yeah, it's also the ability to get to meet other people who would be great to work with you. And also a lot of our collaborators. So you get, a lot of chances, if you're not already conversing with them quite a bit online, to be able to speak to them in person about, what's happening with the future of development in Node and sort of like the problems that you're facing so that they can help make that better.
Mm-hmm. I think you'll end up meeting, a lot of people that have had a pretty similar story to you, but have probably, discovered various different tools or have different workflows that you can always kind of learn from. There's a lot of kind of, melding of minds between different people that are there for, similar reasons. And I think also, compared to other events, it taps you much more into the core community, like the people working on Node. And that's really useful for thinking about, production, debugging, and monitoring and stuff like that. Like there's still work going on in core to make that easier. And so you can always line up, the direction that you're going in with where the platform is going.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll see y'all there. Great. All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm sorry this was such a, we don't have exciting Node stories, but also I think that's the real power of Node right now. It is this mature thing that just works, and we can drop it in at Twitter, which is not a small thing.
Yeah, I mean, around the time that we were starting the foundation, we were like, we need to make it boring. We need, that was literally something that we would say. It needs to just be this thing that everybody relies on and doesn't have to think about anymore.
Right, we don't even know what version we're running. But 2 years ago, that was a huge deal. Oh, you can't switch to that. You knew what features were coming. You knew whether they were unstable. You had to have all this overhead, and now it's I don't know, 6 something. So it's awesome. But yeah, the story here is kind of dull, but which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it's really about, we've tried to use Node.js in a way that makes sense for us. And I think that's the flexibility that it offers for, that allows, basically app developers to do everything from build servers to tooling to support everything. I think we just made use of it in a way that worked for us, and not try to do anything too crazy, replace our Scala web server with a comparable Node.js web server. We picked something far simpler. And I think that's that's worked out really well for us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think it's boring at all, and I think this is a story that people like to hear. It makes them more comfortable with investing in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, awesome. All right. Well, thanks y'all for joining us today and telling your story.
Yeah, thanks as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was
Yeah. Take care.
excellent.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Mhm.